Hey, I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Jennifer, and this is the Dwayne and Jennifer podcast.
We think you're going to really enjoy this podcast. It really touches on just the last year and a half. We interviewed Joel Richardson. I loved it. He was transparent. It was actually humbling, helpful, honest, yet with some hope and some truth in it. So we've been a little inconsistent with our podcast. We're probably going to step that up a little bit, but we're having a good time in walking through this in the posture of helping, and that's why we're doing this a little bit. Just how do we walk through what we've all just walked through in this last season? So stick around. I think this will be helpful. Hey, Joel, welcome, buddy. It is it's good to have you jumping in with us here.
It's good to be on with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. I think probably most of the people that listen to us probably know who you are, but just when did you move to Kansas City? When did you find the Lord? When did you get married? Just give us a boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I came to faith in 91, moved to Kansas City in 93. Pretty shortly thereafter, I had read Some Said It Thundered by David Pitches.
Oh, yeah.
The story of the Kansas City prophets, which made it very palatable. And, I was looking for a Bible school that believed in the gifts of the Spirit, but that also really valued responsible, study of the Word and that sort of thing. At the time, Sam Storms was the president of Grace Training Center. So that's really what brought me out. And then I met Amy, my wife. We got married in 97. And I was only supposed to be here for 2 years.
Okay.
But then met this beautiful gal, and that kind of life happened, and that changed things. So I was supposed to be here 2 years, and I guess it's been, 32 now.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah.
That happened fast.
Yeah, it goes by fast. Life goes by fast in retrospect. But so I was so Amy was in master's commission. So we were in, let's say, I always joke and I say the various pre-incarnate manifestations of Mike Bickle ministry prior to, IHOP. And so, we were there when Mike left and started IHOP. And from my perspective, one, I was always a missions guy. I know you guys are missions guys. So I was excited when Floyd McClung came. I thought,
yeah, sort
of the gospel and missions I had always felt as though it was kind of the missing component of the culture of Metro at the time. I never even, I used to go to the prayer meetings, but I could not stay in there for more than half an hour. I had to walk. I have to be out praying, and I love prayer. I just can't sit in a room. It drives me. Sure. So that was just me. But anyway, so from my perspective, Mike Bickle laid his hands on Floyd and said, "This is your pastor now, follow him." And I said, okay. And so we stayed at Metro, which really was, it was really like a 5-year, very slow church split because Mike kind of moved up the street and then was like, it's not a church, but we're going to have regular weekly meetings. And so it quickly became a church. They didn't call it that at first. And so there was just this draw, like a vacuum. And little by little, leaders left. And some of it was because of Floyd's dysfunctional leadership and just the whole dynamic. So we stuck around for that. And then literally, for those who are not familiar, in my head, I thought I always liked and respected Mike, but I thought his leadership was way too topsy-turvy, quick turn in here. And so I go for my family, to lead my family, I want stability. So ironically, I put my family under Floyd's leadership. Well, Floyd also had some pretty dysfunctional leadership. So it came down to like the final day when, we had bought this super expensive property over on Holmes. And then they announced we had this big, huge church picnic. And then we went inside and we had the picnic. We went inside and they announced we fired Floyd last night.
Oh,
and we
wow.
were just like, what in the world? So went to church the next week. Michael Sullivan and Terry, were secondary leaders at the time. So just still love and just respect them so much for what they went through. But it was like 150 people. And so the next week, Amy said, I'm going to New Day, which was Lloyd and Brenda Rindles, and she was like, if you want to come, you can come. So we started going to New Day for a few years, and then like I was part of a house church that I co-led for about 5 years with my friend John Harrigan. So like I've been around, but always on the peripheral. I would say I always had kind of just enough discernment to know that IHOP culture was a bit dysfunctional. My perspective was like, they're doing great stuff. I like those guys, but the culture's weird. And it's best just to go over there and benefit from it a little bit, but not really put yourself in the middle of it. So that's kind of the long and short of it. And then, year and a half ago, just sort of everything changed.
Absolutely everything.
I think your perspective is super interesting, because I think that was a lot of people's perspective of being able to go and benefit from it without having to be directly in it and kind of entwined in it. And I think for many people that has even made the discovery difficult to embrace, because they really only just saw the good of it. But you actually had the discernment to see both components of it, which is helpful for you.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to brag and say I had all this great discernment, but I didn't. I can look back and say I had some discernment, but I also had, horrible discernment as well. And and look, I'll be honest with you, because everyone's processing this differently. Yeah. And it's difficult because right now, as a male Christian leader, if I share my opinion and there's other people out there who don't like my opinion, then it becomes the topic of discussion and everyone lays in and analyzes it and pieces it out. My perspective is I still fully believe that the birthing of the prayer movement in the earth is a positive thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Prayer is good. That's not to say, that's in no way am I trying to minimize or dismiss all of the dysfunction and the hurt and the wounding. Right. But the reality is, I can go to northern Iraq right now, and there's a house of prayer. It might not be 24 hours. I can go to Istanbul. There's 3 or 4. I can go all over the world. And people have sort of bought into the idea of prayer. Now, again, I'm not saying that the entire package is positive, but I do believe that the Lord used this incredibly broken, cultic thing to birth something really beautiful. And that's these things are difficult to try to process, because you go, why, God, why would you bless something that's so perverse and so corrupt?
Yeah. Right.
And these are just things that as Christians, I think we really value certainty. And I think before all of this, I was someone who, I was more of an apologist type of guy. And I don't know, I definitely leaned more toward the side of thinking I had certainty in a lot of areas. My wife being sick for a few years before this, definitely, very sick, really challenged, my emotional relationship to my faith and things like that. So, I was wrestling through some things, but that said, I've come to the place now, a year and a half after the explosion, where I'm very comfortable with a lack of certainty in a lot of areas and segments of my faith. And I'm fine just saying, I don't understand you, Lord, why you do this, why you allowed this to happen, but I trust you. Come on. And ultimately, I don't really have a choice. And I'll, you can explain it when we get there. Not to, this might sound a little blasphemous, but, I love the line, John Prine, in one of his songs, he says, God, you forgive us, and we'll forgive you, which I know that's blasphemy, but I understand what he's saying is, there's a lot of things that hurt us in choosing to follow God and trust God. There's things that wound our hearts, and we have to choose to trust him in the midst of that.
That's actually beautiful, because we crave certainty, because then we think we're okay. And we've got to a little bit go the mystery around the eternal, who's never had a beginning. We have to embrace that, and we are finite. He's infinite, and I will never have this settled. Because I so appreciate, I was so in the center of this, lacked great discernment at times, but I was trying to constantly go, no, we can get better here. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until we actually left in 2013 that I had concluded this is never going to become a healthy ministry. And I was always trying to fight for health on the inside. although I could probably not even define that at the time. But I'm with you. I wish I had way more discernment, you know.
But to your original point about, the lack of certainty, I read the Psalms now very differently, and you see it everywhere in the book of Psalms. Like, why is my throat is hoarse from crying out to you? Where are you, O God? Yeah. And yet he also writes in Psalm 139, where can I flee from your presence? If I go to the heights and the depths. And so there is so much mystery involved in walking out our faith. And I want a formula, but there is no formula other than Jesus plus nothing equals salvation. But between here and there, I think there's so much nuance and pain that God didn't cause, pain that he allowed. It's just complicated.
Yeah, it's extremely complicated. Look, where there's people, things are going to be complicated. Where there's cults, it's complicated with a little, squared up in the corner or
totally
whatnot. And so, yeah, it's been a mess. And I would say where I'm at right now is probably a lot better than where I've been. There were times throughout this when I would just say, on my really bad days, I'm a hopeful agnostic. I would say, like, I really hope this is all true, but I don't know. Like on my really bad days, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
And then on my good days, I was, a fiery tongue-speaking Pentecostal doom preacher, kind of, and it would swing back and forth from day to day. Where I'm at now is, I am a believer, but there's definitely, as I said, aspects of my faith that I'm okay holding with mystery and just saying, I don't need to have my statement of faith all perfect. And, I'm not a pastor. I'm not leading a church. I'm basically a YouTuber at this point who's writing and teaching and that sort of thing. And, my faith is, I definitely would adhere to all of the, historical evangelical statements of faith and, these type of things. But, I would say like emotionally, because there's the difference between what you intellectually acknowledge and that sort of thing. But emotionally, I'd say that's where most of the wrestling still remains.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your transparency on this, Joel, because I think it's one of the main problems is actually today is leadership's lack of transparency, and they're not willing to even open up the question that they have questions, and they're not willing to go there and then verbalize it, because the body of Christ is in great crisis in some places, and we're not even recognizing it. When did you get into the study of the end of the age, the second coming of the Lord? Has it always been an interesting topic to you, or?
That's really interesting. So I got saved in this really crazy, this is really funny, not funny, like haha, but funny, like, but anyway, I actually got saved in a tent revival meeting from this, super Southern holiness doom prophet who was actually a Branhamite.
Wow.
Now, I had zero grid for this world. I was like a nominal Catholic kid from South Shore, Massachusetts. So I didn't understand Protestant, never mind Southern, never mind holiness Southern tent revival culture, Yeah. And so for me, it's ironic that I got saved in this context of this tent revival meeting, and they believe in the gifts of the Spirit and all these things. And then years later, probably about 2 years before the scandal broke out with IHOP, I read a memoir of the daughter of his main organist who grew up traveling around with the tent revival show. And she wrote this memoir, and the guy was an absolute, well, let's put it this way. I like the way she wrote the book because she's a Buddhist. She's not even a believer at this point in her life, but she acknowledges that one, the guy was a fraud, but two, he had power. And she acknowledges that he had power. She would say, like, we would get to a town, and because this is one of the things that I've wrestled with, and forgive me for, bunny trail.
Yeah, no worries.
But I've wrestled with, like, who is Mike Bickle? who is this guy? Who is that guy? And what's real? And, I've come to the place where I think that much of who we thought Mike Bickle was is real. Mm-hmm. It's just that there was also this other part of him that we didn't know, and that's also very real. I don't think that the side that we saw was completely fake. I think he fully believes, his own lies, the stories that he tells. I think he believes them.
I do too.
So with this guy that I got saved at, his meeting, this gal, she would say we would get to a town and he would take 3 or 4 gallons of water and his Bible and walk out in the woods and come back like 2 weeks later out of the woods, skinny as a rail, having just fasted for a couple of weeks. She goes, he would be up all night crying and praying. But now get this is a great story. He got arrested for tax fraud and tax evasion, and did a couple years, I want to say back in the 80s, in prison. And he would every day take his Bible and walk around this bush that was in the middle of the yard and pray. And after, in a couple years, the guy was so powerful and influential, he would have 3 or 4 guys following him. And she said, years later, she said, at this prison, that bush is a tree, and they call it the prayer tree. Like 20 years later, people every day walk around that tree and pray. And, here's a fraud, a charlatan in prison for, stealing from the government and people. And yet, whatever, this part of his persona, he embraced it enough that it actually impacted people for generations. So this is part of the mystery of processing all this stuff. And so anyway, the point is, I got saved in that context. And then I end up out here in Kansas City, and I, again, as this nominally Catholic kid, I actually had enough discernment back then to say, the guy that I got saved at his tent revival meeting, he's crazy. Mm-hmm. And I want to find some place that's where they believe in the gifts of the Spirit, but they're not charismaniacs.
Okay.
And so the irony is I came to Kansas City looking for what I thought was a very responsible, more balanced type of place. And it certainly felt that way. Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of people looking on as this thing's, blown up and they're watching videos of this and hearing crazy things, they go, how could anyone in the world have bought this? But the reality is, for most of us that were around, I didn't hear most of the really crazy stuff. I heard whispers of some of the crazy stuff, but it was never really, for me at least, it was never front and center. I did see, obviously just typical charismatic culture where you see a lot of, I'll just say, flakiness.
Yep.
And I always just kind of looked and just went, yeah, it's just human nature. Like I've had the blessing of being an itinerant speaker for, well over 15 years plus now. And I speak, I'll speak in Baptist churches, I'll speak in Pentecostal churches, Messianic synagogues. One week we've got a hymnal and it's just Baptist. The next week it's smoke machines, on and on and on. But some years ago, I'd spoke at this big Baptist church in North Carolina area, all black, about 1,500 members. I literally was the only white person in the church, except for I saw one white gal in the audience. I mean, and the emotionalism. I mean, the service went on for like 3 hours, and people falling down and flailing about. I was like, wait a minute, these are Baptists. They don't believe in any, and they would say they don't believe in the gifts of the Spirit. But so here's the irony. Most, onlookers, who study religion, they would just kind of go, well, that's just the emotional enthusiasm. That's how they do it. That's how the African American community does it. When you see white people do it, you kind of go, that's weird. Like when you see black folks get emotional, you just go, oh yeah, they're just super passionate people. But when you see a bunch of white charismatics do it, it does feel weird. I mean, just, kind of being honest. And so I always just chalked it up to weird culture.
Yeah.
I didn't see a lot of the bad doctrine. Now, in retrospect, I see a lot of the bad doctrine, but I really didn't see much of it beforehand, if I'm to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And so just touch on bad doctrine, and has your doctrine, as your theology shifted, or is it you just didn't really touch the bad doctrine taught at IHOP?
In terms of, I didn't really prepare my mind to think about all the
totally.
But,
Just hit a couple if you want.
Yeah, well, so like on my own personal journey, I went through like 20 years ago during the emergent church craze, Brian McLaren, Rob Bell, and
Yep.
all that. I was really close. I came real close to converting to Eastern Orthodoxy. Um, and it was partially because I love the beauty of it, the smells and the bells and the ancient nature of it and the, so forth. But a big part of it was a reaction against the subjectivism of Protestantism at large, not just the
Yep.
charismatic church. The charismatic church is known for being far more emotional, far less rooted in the scriptures, for having a far looser form of church governance, and all that's true. Kind of we definitely are pretty willy-nilly, fly by the seat of our pants, and that sort of thing. But anyway, so as a reaction to the trending that I saw in the church, which was valid, really trending toward just unmooring ourselves from anything that feels like historical Christianity.
Right.
So I was considering becoming Orthodox. Ultimately I do have a problem with their excessive veneration of Mary and my eschatology. Oh, that you asked me about studying the end times. My eschatology is ultimately just incompatible with orthodoxy because you can be a premillennialist, but you really cannot in the Orthodox Church reject supersessionism or replacement theology. And for me, the centrality of Israel is just something that, once you see it in the scriptures, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Unless you choose to unsee it. Anyway, so
Yeah.
during those years, I wrestled with a lot of things. And where I finally landed is I just call myself a mere Christian. And this is very American, incredibly individualistic, but I just go, hey, there's a lot of good stuff here that I like. I'm going to take it. And all the other stuff, I'm going to leave it. And, the Orthodox Church goes, you can't do that. We are a package deal. And you go, just did it. I'm going to read some of your stuff and appreciate some of your practices, but I'm not going to become Orthodox. And so admittedly, it is a very, independent Western kind of mentality. But again, I'm okay with that. And so, I find my home most often among a more conservative, Protestant environment. But by the same token, I would say that because of my study of the end of the age, and my view, I wouldn't even say the end of the age, but just my view of redemptive history.
Yep.
My view of the gospel,
Yep.
really, because in my opinion, the gospel is the good news of the restoration of all things,
Yeah.
which is summarized by the restoration of Eden, of paradise and perfection, and the restoration of the kingdom of David. Those two things together is the overarching good news of the entire Bible. So I can't get away from that. So I would say theologically, I find myself most at home among, let's say, Messianic Judaism, even though I'm a Gentile. So that was a long answer to a bunch of different things, but I'm comfortable just kind of being a ragamuffin refugee. I believe in God, I believe in Jesus and the Bible. But where my home is right now, that's and I go to church, by the way. Randy
Yeah,
Bolt,
you do.
my pastor.
Yeah, you
Well,
do.
I should say I occasionally go to church.
We'll call Randy and kind of get an attendance on how you're doing.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But I'm traveling a lot, and then when I get home, there's always something with the kids and blah blah blah. But so I do attend church. I love the Bridge. I love Randy dearly, and I love the people. But in terms of the form and the structure and where is my home and where do I feel most comfortable, I'm very much just kind of a sort of homeless refugee in that sense, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where many are at, and they're trying to find their way. Do you think you'll ever return to more of a institutional church, or is it just kind of where you're at right now, or what would cause you to maybe sign up again, or would you?
So I think being in relationship, being in community, being submitted to or being accountable,
Yep.
being transparent, and being involved in people's lives, I think that's healthy for anyone, Christian or not, regardless. This is just a healthy way to live. if I'm to be honest right now,
Yeah.
I have a real hard time trusting not just the church. I have a hard time trusting people.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to be introspective and aware of where I'm at and say, I'm probably not in a healthy place, but I'm going to have a really difficult time ever trusting people again for the rest of my life. Before this, I was way over the top, way too trusting. And I'm afraid that it's hurt me, and so I'm aware of that, and I need to probably get over that because, as I said, living in community is healthy. I just right now, just the thought of the vulnerability that you put yourself in by being in community, I'm not comfortable with it. Again, just being honest.
No, I appreciate that.
I mean, I said something very similar to Jennifer a week ago. I think, and I actually, there's a part of me that craves healthy relationship, and I want friends that are in the faith. I don't, that are true bonded friends. But I'm in the same place. When fool me twice, that's wolf. I got to figure that one out. You know what I mean? I don't want to go there. I so believed in who Mike Bickle was. And yeah, I saw the dysfunction, but I never would have thought that he was as dark as he is. And so that betrayal is pretty significant for a lot of us,
Yeah.
And I'm having to work that out.
I mean, I would have said that I didn't think Mike was a good leader. I had concluded that, but I believed he was a good man.
Yeah.
And so now to come to the conclusion, I don't think he's a good man, has skewed my perspective because the narrative that he drove and the intelligence that he had to create a narrative for so many years, I believed him. I believed he was humble. I believed he was almost incapable of moral failure. And, that's on me. But I saw so much evidence that he was who he said he was. But when you have this complete divorce of a double life, and like you said earlier, when you believe your own lies and your storyline, you're incredibly convincing because you have no hesitation. And so it's just navigating that now with other people that appear really great. But I don't know. I mean, I think we're all in the same place. There's just a level of trust deferred for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to take time.
And, they say time heals all things. It's actually not true, but it does take time to heal things.
Yes.
And so, I'm aware of that. I don't, even despite, despite all the harm and the pain that Mike has caused, I don't really, want to just talk bad about him. Mm-hmm. But I'll say just, my perspective is in reading Tom Scott's book, I actually think he did a really good job at sort of an immature psychoanalysis. And I view Mike now as primarily a very, very broken man. I think Tom is right that Mike probably does have some measure of, he's probably on the spectrum a little bit.
Wait, do you mean Bob Scott?
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say? Tom Scott?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Bob Scott. Okay. Yeah. Tom. Yes. Sorry. Bob Scott. I don't know where Tom Scott came from.
I don't know.
So yeah, Bob Scott. So, I think Mike I think he probably is a little bit on the spectrum. I think he has all the telltale signs of being an adult child of, alcoholic parents. And I think he does have some narcissistic traits. But this is what I wanted to say is, I think I don't care who you are. I mean, I can't even understand narcissists. Like when I've tried to understand the mind of a narcissist, it's terrifying. It's like peering into a black abyss and, you don't know what's in it. It's terrifying because you go like, could my brain ever get that broken? It's a scary thing to try to even figure out. But I think all humans, even narcissists, I think the thing that we all don't want to be is a hypocrite. And so whenever someone starts living a double life, I think what they do is they create a theology to justify it.
Yeah.
they try to say, no, what I'm doing is not a fundamental contradiction. I'm not a bad person. They develop a theology. And so I actually think that Mike developed, I'll call it a secret theology. And I've heard whispers of it, things like, like he secretly told Luke that, that Mike is the David of the movement, but Luke's going to go on to become the Solomon. And, I go, golly, I never heard anything like that. And it could just be, that may not be true, but I've heard that a few times. And so I think there was almost like a whole prophetic history and doctrine that Mike developed that was almost like the inner circle secret doctrine. And I actually do think that he used some of that, classic cultic King David sort of theology to justify some of what he was doing. And, again, he definitely had some weird ideas with this whole Diane's going to die and you're going to become my wife and all this stuff. And strangely, even after the fact, she kind of defended him on that, which again is pretty normal with a lot of these wives defending their husbands. So I think Mike actually did develop a whole doctrine through which he tried to justify his lifestyle. I don't think he ever thought of himself as just a flat out scumbag. I could be totally wrong. And,
I think you're going the right direction. And I think he really believes the stories. And I think he holds, I've heard the whispers as well, that he holds some private, I would say, very inner circle ideas around forgiveness, repentance. And I think that he really did see himself as almost one in a million type people in regards to the story of redemption almost. I think he had a pretty high inflated opinion of himself. And that allowed him to have some inner, I would almost say inner doctrine around some of his activities.
That, and he had a very unique definition of what telling the truth is. Because I remember him saying to me, he goes, if you say Dwayne is the best looking man on the earth, you can say that out loud, but in your head, you're saying 3 other sentences for a 56-year-old bald guy from Canada born in Alberta. And he
I
says,
didn't know he's from Canada?
Come on. There he is.
That's my root system, bro.
It just changed everything. No,
Everything,
for
right?
the positive, right?
We'll never look at you the same.
Never. So he said, so if you say something to someone, but you withhold 3 or 4 sentences, but you say them in your head, then you didn't lie. And I'm like, whoa, that's that's next level.
You thought that's crazy back then.
Yeah.
Because he told you that one time.
Yeah, but of course you are the best looking guy on the earth. So, that's just a given. Everyone agrees.
Hands down, that's
comment below.
Exactly.
But, his point of you could withhold information as long as you said the information inside your head, then you weren't lying. That's peculiar at best.
Yeah, extremely unusual. Yeah,
that's
for
a
sure.
level of brokenness. So what caused you to, October 2023, what caused you to so quickly want to figure things out and get to the truth? Because you responded, I think, probably quicker than almost anyone else to get into it. I don't know, I can't remember but you had a meeting with Stuart, you had a meeting with Dave, you jumped in real quick where nobody else was.
Right.
What motivated you there?
Yeah. So one, I'm a very fast adopter. So just in general, I tend to be a very fast adopter just naturally. But what had happened in my own life is that the year before, so in April of 2023, my friend who was the underground church planter pastor in Iran for ministry that I was connected to, we found out that he had been cheating on his wife for years. And so we had to fire him. And so when we did that, he immediately sent lawyers' letters to the board. Now, I was not on the board, but I just kind of had some residual spiritual, authority, or I was kind of like a father figure, I guess. So they kept me in the loop, and he sent out letters, and it was just straight out threatening to destroy everyone's lives. Like, it literally said, so and so doesn't have anything left to lose. Pastor X doesn't have anything left to lose. You all do. You have property. You have families. You have ministries. You have reputations. Why would you risk all of those things, which will all come out in the public in depositions, just so you can shame your friend? And this was coming from one of the most, I'll just say this. I saw for the first time the seedy underbelly of the evangelical machine. Mm-hmm. And it was disgusting, because I'm sitting there on a Zoom call with a guy who literally was a potato farmer from Idaho, who had been volunteering for years, making no money, just happy to serve this ministry. When it hit him, and on the call, he goes, "You mean I could lose my farm over this?"
Wow.
Here's this guy that I've been serving, and he's been cheating on his wife and everything. And now he's threatening that he's going to take my farm away if I simply do what he hired me to do, which is hold him accountable. And so, it was experiences like this. So this was my first round of seeing the patterns. Then there were two, I won't say the entire church, but there were two individuals from two of the largest churches in the country who we had heard, and I can't confirm this, so this is just allegedly, but they were funding him behind our backs. So even though he was guilty, even though he was not in submission to any pastoral authority, he was still the hotshot underground church planter in Iran. And that's sexy, and that's whatever. And from what we heard, they had given him close to $100,000 around our backs. And, so I realized, okay, so what happens is all the little guys, all the servants, all the workers, they get thrown under the bus. And when all is said and done, the hot shot, it doesn't matter what they do. They're still being funded. They're still going to be celebrated. Yeah. And they're going to have, their life is going to go on. So, I won't tell the details of how I started to learn this, but so I was speaking at these School of the Messengers, with Wes and Dave. And, so I'm right there speaking and on the brochures and everything as it's about to break. So Wes Martin was like, "Oh, Joel, like he has no idea." So he kind of like gave me hints. Okay. He didn't really tell me, but he gave me hints. And I quickly just kind of pieced it together. And I went, "Oh my gosh." I was like, so first, here was how I processed it. I thought, okay, Mike Bickle's human. He's messed up with the ladies, maybe a couple times. Okay, I can accept that. That was a huge thing to accept. That alone, like, oh my gosh, right. he's just, right. And I'm kind of exaggerating, but it was like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, Paul Cain, Mike Bickle, I mean, that's totally an exaggeration. I never saw it that way, but there is just this very shocking kind of thing that happens when you go, wow, this guy's just, a struggler, just like everyone else. And then as I began to see, okay, no, wait, there's actually evidence of not just 2 or 3, but maybe 10, 20. And then I kicked into this gear, which is, and I said this at one point to you, Dwayne, because people were like, wow, Joel, you just threw yourself out there and you know something that we don't know. And I was like, I kind of know, but I would liken it to this, and I'm uncovering one of my daughters, but I don't think she cares. This was years ago. I walked into one of my daughter's rooms, and it was filled with pot smoke. And so she had been hitting the bong, but I'm an old school pothead, so I don't even know the junk anymore, but it was wax. So there was no evidence, was the point. The room was filled with smoke, but I couldn't find anything. And she was like, "You can't punish me because you can't prove it." I was like, "Heck, I can't. You're getting high right now." Like, and I don't care because this is not a court case.
Right.
And so with Mike, I was like, it's clear that there is enough smoke to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that he is guilty. Now, can we prove it in a court of law? No. And this was kind of the contention once it went public, where people like, prove it. You're like, we don't have to prove it. This is not a legal case. This is a church. This is an ecclesiological issue. And ecclesiologically, in the church, if someone is not above reproach, you have every right to act. And people were trying to make it, well, but it's about the legal case, and you better have legal proof, otherwise you can't say this stuff. And so that was kind of some of the stuff that was happening. But anyway, all this to say is, I went and I met with Dave and Stuart and Dave, quite frankly, because I was in their position. I know what it's like to be them. Yeah. I was the guy that was, friends with, in my own organization with Dalton, back when there was this couple that was calling for a third-party investigation. I was the guy that held Julie Roys off. I was the guy that came up with excuses. Now, I believed they were legitimate, right, biblical excuses at the time. I would say all the stuff, Matthew 18, well, we can't be talking about this stuff on social media. That's not healthy. And there's elements of truth there, right? But it was all BS. It was all just an excuse to avoid going through the hard, difficult process of accountability and transparency and all that. So I was appealing to those guys, do the right thing, because if you don't, and I told them straight out, if you don't, I said, in 1 year from now, you're both going to be filling out applications at Applebee's. And Dave, laughed at me and he said, I'm not going anywhere. And Stuart was like, I can fly planes. And I was like, well, you're going to be flying planes. I was like, listen, it's already blown up on social media. If you guys don't, within 24 hours, this was on a Saturday, I said, within 24 hours, if you don't come out tomorrow and clearly call for a third-party investigation, take your hands off the wheel, put the entire ministry on the altar, and trust God. If you don't do that, you're done. And admittedly, I was asking a lot of them for them to just get it, and they didn't. They fumbled the ball. They came out the next day and they talked in circles, and Stuart said, well, we're exploring, I don't even remember what he said, but I went to church at Forerunner just to see how he did, hoping and just begging, like, please, do the right thing. And he dropped the ball, and I walked out of there saying it's over. They destroyed the ministry. And because the reality is, if they had done the right thing from the beginning, they actually could have saved IHOP.
100%.
They could have saved a lot of other lives and things. And, and maybe you go, no, it's better that it all came out. The Lord's sovereign. But so I'd been the guy. I'd been in that position. I know what it's like to make up what seem like good excuses and hide behind biblical excuses, but in the end, when it's all said and done, it's just BS. And then the other thing was, I said, but if Mike now, and then I thought if Mike did all this stuff with these women, which it's clear that he did, I know Mike, he's gonna come out and he's gonna put on a clinic. And he's going to show us what repentance looks like. He's going to show us what King David repents like. And he's not going to be like all these other guys that hide. And then he came out and he did exactly what my Iranian friend did. And I was like, oh my gosh, if Mike digs his heels in, and I knew it from day one, I said, he is going to destroy the entire ministry, all of his, under second tier leaders, he's going to destroy them. Especially you guys that are out there trying to, confront it. And he's going to destroy families, are literally going to be ripped in half.
Yes.
And I just was like, this is horrible. This is a nightmare. I was like, I can't believe this. And then I just said, like, look, I have this platform, and I always say this, like, look, I was just some idiot living in my divorced mother's basement, selling weed, you know what I mean? And I end up at this Pent Revival meeting. The Lord opens my eyes. I've always viewed myself as a throwaway. I should have been dead so many times.
Wow.
I really should be like dead in hell, in prison, one of the above by now. And I was like, but somehow you gave me a platform. And if I have a platform, I have a responsibility to use it to try to stave off as much of the damage as possible. And so that's what I did. And I thought it was a kamikaze mission. And, I praised my wife on the Susie Lamb, did an interview with her. But, my wife's been sick now. It's been 4.5 years. And I mean, there were seasons there where she was in such severe, unceasing agony that, she was just in a cocoon of agony for, a couple of years. And I looked at her and I thought, if I throw myself into this, I'm not going to survive. Mike Bickle, he's going to devour me, but I have to try. I have to try. And then I said, but I can't do that to my wife.
Right.
Like I have to pay her bill. Like we have medical bills and this and that. And I'm the only one working and you know what I mean? And this and that. And I just said, like, I said to her, I said, like, look, if I do this, we probably aren't, I'm probably not, my ministry's probably not going to survive. I'm going to be, framing decks or something in 6 months, and we're going to be struggling to pay the bills, and we're going to be on Medicare and, this type of thing. And she just said, I don't care, do it.
Wow.
And so I was just incredibly grateful that my wife, who, she understands abuse and the damage that it does and this sort of thing. I'm just grateful that she backed me from day one, because there was no way I could have carried what I carried if I didn't have her full support. She got a little mad at me on the night that I took the picture with Eric Voles. But I probably deserve that. So that was like literally the only time she hesitated in her support the whole time. And so I just have to give her, praise, because it was heroic. She was laying in bed in pain.
Wow.
And she just said, I don't care, pull the trigger, do it, because it's the right thing to do.
It's amazing.
That was the decision ultimately. And I've made a million mistakes along the way. I've been a jerk. I've been a hypocrite. I've been too angry. I've let my emotions, just spill out on social media. I've done a lot of things wrong. But, I go like, this was a fight that I wasn't looking for. But it was a fight that was worth fighting, and we all fought it together. I mean, it was absolutely a group effort. Yeah. And it wasn't just, it wasn't just believers, it was unbelievers, it was everybody in between. And it, that to me was actually quite beautiful. I actually went to that when they did early on, they did that protest. I think, I'm not sure all who organized it, but anyway, so I actually went to that protest. I didn't go into the prayer room when they had the tape over their mouths, but I just showed up and I was like, look, guys, I know that there's people all over the faith spectrum here. There's believers, unbelievers, people in between. I said, I just want you to know that as far as I'm concerned, we're all called to be good. Like at a baseline, we're called to be good humans.
Yeah.
And we're all called to be good neighbors. And I said, I don't care where you guys are on the faith spectrum. This is the right thing to do. And I want you to know I'm going to stand wholeheartedly with you until we take this predator down, period. Mm-hmm. And so, this was definitely something that I was, very much out of what I was used to, my familiarity zone. Mm-hmm. But it was a group effort. Mm-hmm. And a lot of mess and a lot of mistakes along the way, but it was a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Because I wanted to go, man, I shouldn't have done this. I should have done this. Right. But I did that once, and they so weaponized that against me. But today, I still feel the same way. There's things that I absolutely could have done better in this process, and I think we were all trying to do our best and for me it was the most unfamiliar waters I've ever been. I had never been in something like this, and I think you're just probably a little bit more wiser. I'm just incredibly naive at sometimes, and I thought I have to step into this ring, and I mean deep down I was like, he's gonna repent.
Yeah.
And someone told me he's not. And I was it was a wise person, and I I was like, yeah, I hope you're not right. And so, but also though, Jennifer and I will probably do another podcast. We've lost pretty much everything from this. Mm-hmm. And
except each other.
And you,
I got you, babe.
I'm imagining that you've lost a lot from this.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, the loss has been, it's been heavy, I mean, I've lost some of my best friends in the world over this, lost close friends, tons of, I would say, ministry acquaintances. And some of them, they would reach out and say, but Joel, you're so angry. And I would be like, no, I'm not. Well, actually, let me add this.
Yeah.
There was no way that any of us could have done anything perfectly. Like
Right.
everybody made mistakes. But I recognized from the beginning that your job and Alan's job and, some of the, because I've never been, IHOP leadership. I'm just this wild card. Your job was to be dignified and, professional. I was just this wild card over on the side. And so I could kind of do whatever I wanted. So I understood my role.
Yeah.
And there's another factor here that I should throw in because, the weird dynamic that happens nowadays is, the scandal gets revealed and then there's just like this big social media community that rises up. And so what happens is people, they demand, if you know something, you need to tell us. What they don't realize is that, guys, we are playing an incredibly sophisticated chess game
Yes.
against a mafia family.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can't just put your cards out on the table.
Right.
You
Right.
can't put in, because I'm sorry that you are, that you really want to know and that you're part of this, that you have investment and everything, but you're not, like, to some of these people online, like, the world's not all about you.
Yep.
And if you put this information out there, you risk destroying the whole, because they're working behind the
Right.
scenes overtime to discredit every witness and everything.
Yes.
This is, like when I found out about Dr. Brown, I was like, I've got good friends that need to know, but I can't tell them, because if I tell them, then they're going to feel obligated to tell their friend. And Dr. Brown is immediately going to start working to destroy, discredit
Yes. Yes.
the witnesses. And so there's a game that's being played. And so, I very early on was like, look, if I like Dwayne and Alan and these guys, they need to represent the former leadership of IHOP. If I destroy my ministry, who cares? Again, I'm just a former idiot living in his mother's basement. I can go frame decks, like, I'll survive. And so I was okay kind of playing the role of just, basically like, if you're fighting a mafia, I mean, I don't know what I was, but, I was not playing dirty, but I was playing rough. And,
Right.
And I kind of saw my role in all of it, and it fits my personality anyway. So,
But I
found comfort in it, to be honest. We needed your voice. We needed
pressure applied from different angles.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm looking back and seeing actually the importance of your role.
Yes.
I've thought this, and the different voices that were applying pressure from different angles, and it was necessary to, and to me, everything changed when Tammy released with the Kansas City Star. And it was up until that point,
we were still pushing the ball uphill.
Every conversation I was having to defend myself.
Yeah.
And when that happened, the ball turned. Yeah. And I think it was all the different forces of pressure that brought it to that point in January when she went public.
It should have been enough beforehand. Like,
For sure.
Deborah's story, that should have been enough. All the other things, it should have been enough, but it wasn't. It wasn't until Tammy came forward that the snowball happened and people went, oh, he is guilty.
Yeah. I had one, I won't say his name, but, a close friend that, had been kind of in the thick of everything for years. And very early on, I reached out and I was just like, hey, we haven't talked, like, how you doing?
Yeah.
And he just laid into me. He was just like, what you're doing on social media is bad. It's wrong. Like, it's embarrassing, and just laid in hard. And I'm like, you mean to tell me that I'm in the middle of one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life, and you're bashing me because I'm speaking out? And, I responded harshly. I just said, cool. I don't ever want anything to do with you again for the rest of my life,
Yep.
Then it was not until, and that was just, I had to make that decision. I had to decide, I'm going to lose friends. I'm okay with that. Like, you have to determine at the front end, if I'm going to carry this thing through, I'm going to lose friends. And so there was, a little bit of the kind of walls that you have to put up. But then it was after Tammy came out that he messaged maybe a few weeks later. He was like, hey, now that the truth has finally come out, I just wanted to say, like, I understand some of your angst on social media. And I'm like, no. The truth came out when Deborah came forward.
Absolutely.
The truth was out. Tammy absolutely turned the tide, and she was a hero, and she was a godsend. And thank God for Lee Cummings, her pastor, that just basically said, look, if they're going to come for you, they're going to go through me. And, he really, Lee, I have to give him credit too, because, I jumped out there, and like I said, I thought I was going to get devoured. And he was the first big ministry leader that retweeted and said, I endorse this message. And I went, oh, somebody's supporting me. Like, that was, have that support, to have any
absolutely
support, it was huge.
Huge.
To have him, kind of help pastor Tammy forward, it was just an absolute godsend.
So let me ask this question to you. What are, like, how do you respond when you have a leader, when you have somebody approach you and say, listen, man, this public dialogue, it's tarnishing the name of Jesus, and it's tarnishing the church. And I've been hit with that a fair bit. How do you respond to that? Like, what's your response to that?
So, one, I say, you can make a good case for that, but the bottom line is, if there was not this public outcry, then these wolves would still be in power, period. I mean, absolutely. So, I kind of go like, spare me, On the other hand, I do get it. Like, I'm one of the guys that's been shouting, screaming, and a lot of people probably hate me for it. But again, and I've said to this, like, there is a wolf in the damn house. Like, we're going to break some furniture. I'm sorry, but we're going to get the wolf out. It's not going to be neat and clean and tidy. Like, there's a big, like, what has unfolded this past year and a half, this is the single biggest story in the past probably 100 years of American evangelicalism. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
A lot of people in, certain segments of the church, they go, I don't even know who these people are, but what's happening is huge. Okay. Yeah. So look, there were things that were necessary to be done. But I also understand that a lot of the stuff that gets said, I look at it and I go, that's gross. So I can put out a quote, let's say, I hesitantly put out, my statement, my conversation that I had with Dr. Brown or Eric Voles. And I put it out there because it's necessary, because, lies are being told, the truth needs to be heard, and there's nothing like actually hearing it. But then I would see some of the comments that people would make, and I'd be like, I don't want anything to do with that. They're just like, destroy,
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of excess. But look, here's the thing is, people are hurting. And so, of course, there's going to be, like, to me, it's not, there's all these people that are upset about social media, like, well, it shouldn't be this way. And I go, but it is this way. Right. Like, you can sit there and rage about it until you die, but you're just acting like a boomer. You know what I mean? Like, this is the new world. Social media is the new reality. You're not going to police it. You're not going to make it healthy. The only thing you can do is you can be healthy. And if your friends are being unhealthy, you can have a conversation with them, but you're not going to convince, generations of people to suddenly mind their manners on social media. It's just not going to happen. It's not reality. Right. So, you can try to deal with the way things should be, or you can deal with them as they are.
Right.
And we have to deal with reality.
100%.
Have you been shocked by the domino effect of, and I guess I call it a domino effect, of Mike Bickle scandal, and then the Robert Morris and the Steve Lawson and the Michael Brown, and just boom, 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 boom. Like, has that shocked you, or did you expect that when the Mike Bickle scandal broke?
It didn't surprise me at all. And I've been so hesitant to ever even say this, but like, the Lord showed me, but I have to qualify this because I actually, funny enough, I shared this little experience that I had the night before, the Thursday night before, or it was the last night before Mike's final Black Horse sermon. I preached one night, he did his Black Horse sermon the next night that was part of that School of the Messengers. And I shared this experience that I had. But what I didn't say, and so I feel comfortable sharing that the Lord spoke to me if I tell the full story. So it was early in 2022. So Amy got really sick in October of 2020. And so, you're talking now a year and a half after my wife being deathly ill, like where she thought she was not going to make it. I didn't think she was going to make it. And, it was just a fight for life, and not just like, well, I might die, but just the unceasing agony and the doctor saying there's nothing we can do. There's no more options, blah, 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 blah. And just holding on. And so she would often go to sleep around 7. And because the only thing that would help her is if she could get a good night's sleep. And so I would vacate the room and try to let her sleep. Well, I'm just wandering around the house for a few hours. And at a certain point in it, I started drinking. And it lasted about 3 months to where, and when I say drinking, like I've never been an alcoholic. I've never, in high school, I was an alcohol abuser, but it's just never really been, most of my adult life, I'll drink socially a little bit, or I go camping or something. For the most part, hasn't been my struggle.
Right.
But it was like, I was not sleeping. I would just sit up all night with my heart race and thinking, like literally, like in the morning, I'll take the youngest ones, I'll shut the door, I'll call the coroner, I'm like planning out what I'm going to do so the kids don't see the body and, this type of thing. I'm just laying in bed all night just with my heart pounding. So it starts out, where I just take a shot of bourbon to put myself to sleep. Well, like 2 months later, I'm running up to the gas station and buying jugs of wild turkey, and I'm like, so
Sorry.
I'm sitting on my back patio one night, just listening to music and, just, it's not like I'm just getting drunk, but, I'm having some food and I'm praying, and I would pray and cry every night, but I was just sitting there and the Lord showed me, and I don't want to play it up because we're just going through the season where all these false prophets, but he just showed me. And it was like the scene that I saw was this famous scene. You've seen it before from World War I. They call it the Battle in the Mud. And it just looks like, it looks like a tornado went through, Joplin, and there's not even a tree left. It's just mud and bodies and smoke. And I just sat there, and it was like I watched and I saw the domino effect, and there was no one left. I mean, there was no one left. And I sat there and I wept, and I'm sitting there drinking, right? Now, by the way, I quit cold turkey after about 2.5, 3 months. I quit. Yeah. That was back in 2022. And I haven't gone back. Okay, just for clarity. That's
no, you need to clarify that. But yeah, you've told me this before. Yeah, for sure.
I confessed it to all my friends and different things and whatnot. But I saw it and I wept because I said, God, please don't let me fall away. Wow. I'm just as susceptible as falling away. And I did. I like cried for weeks and begged God, like, please don't let me fall away, and tried to, get my heart right. But it was weird. I would sit on the patio in that whole time period, and it was like the Lord prepared my heart for all of this in a really weird way. And I don't want to make a big deal of it. But so all that to say is, no, it's not surprising. And I'll even say there's more to come. And there's some even very big ones, maybe even bigger than anything yet. So if anybody thinks it's all over, it's not.
Wow.
What is God after? And then a follow-up, where do you think we're going as a church? But what is God after? Like, what do you think he's wanting to do, pinpoint? It's obvious judgment is in the house of the Lord, but what's he after?
And this might be a little too obvious or simple, but Ezekiel 34, this prophecy where Ezekiel prophesies against the shepherds of Israel. He's like, you guys have not taken care of the sheep. You've fed yourself. You haven't protected them from the wolves. You've actually eaten the sheep. I think he says that. And then the Lord says, like, because you failed so drastically, I'm going to shepherd my own flock. And then strangely, he says, I'm going to shepherd my flock. And then he goes, I'm going to raise up David to shepherd my flock. So it's kind of interesting in that he's saying, I'm going to do it. David's going to do it. But anyway, sorry, I'm teaching theology. And then later, when Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, he's identifying as the shepherd that cares about the sheep. And so what is God doing? Look, the Lord's doing all kinds of things, but there's no question that the priority of his heart throughout the entire Bible are the little ones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the weak, the vulnerable, the victimized, the hurting, the broken, the lame, the outcast, the marginalized, the poor, the rejected. This is the overwhelming emphasis of the entire Bible. And whenever the shepherds rise up, so who then is the faithful and wise servant that the Lord will put in charge of his whole household? Blessed is he if the Lord finds him doing what he's supposed to be doing when he comes back. But for everyone else, he goes, I'm going to cut them up. It's the Lord values caring for the little ones, for the children. That's why he says, like, guys, what are you doing? Let them come to me. Like, these are the ones that the kingdom belongs to. Like, quit limiting that, Anyway, there's sermons and sermons here, but this is the Lord's heart. So whenever you have shepherds that are hurting the sheep, the Lord eventually says enough. And I would say our segment of the body of Christ, this freewheeling, independent, willy-nilly, charismatic world has been because we've been some of the most unaccountable. We've been some of the most guilty. The leash that we've given our leaders has been way, way, way too long, and they've run with it. Yeah. And so the judgment is falling on the charismatic church stronger than anywhere else, because I think we were the loosest, and I think the most abuse was in our house. But it's certainly not the only house, So for the Reform guy sitting back going, oh, look at those crazy charismatics, just wait. For the Baptists, it's everywhere. The Catholics, and it's not just in the church either, by the way. It's,
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
The counseling community and the therapists, you've got abusers even in that space, or those that are advocates, and this type of thing. You've got human nature is universal. But what the Lord is doing is, I fully believe that he's purifying his church. And I know that sounds too simple. It's always been a mystery to me where the Lord says, he's going to present this bride that's going to be spotless and without blame and without blemish. And I go, God, like, that sounds good, but with what I'm seeing on the ground, it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how he's going to get us there, but I know that this is the first step. He's removing all of the outright, frauds and charlatans. I had a idea for a book years ago. It was the idea was like, it starts out where basically Google gets hacked, and sort of like everyone's complete internet history, every keystroke, everything is just publicly searchable. And so that becomes sort of a metaphor for the day of the Lord, when everything will be is done in darkness, will be shouted from the rooftops. And the storyline is that the church just gets decimated. It gets destroyed. There's nothing left. But then out of the rubble rises a broken, limping, weak people that are authentic. And so I would like to believe that that's what he's doing, that, out of the ashes of World War II, that the rebuilding process will begin. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of people out there that are just, the folks that are championing Daystar and championing Michael Brown and, having confetti parties and a lollipop parade for sexual abusers and all this insanity. Like, the Lord, he's going to remove them, or the false church is just going to continue. And those who care about truth and care about the things that God cares about, they're just going to form their own communities and leave. But the answer should be, I have no idea what God's doing, but I think that's what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, I think, I have I'm presently trying to stare at that, and I have almost nothing to say. what is the solution, and I don't have much to say right now. And
Where I'm at right now is I just want to love people. I don't care who they are. I want to love everyone. I want to love his church. I just like, I want to live as a good Christian, but also if someone is an atheist, they go, I think this guy loved me well. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
amen.
I just, right now, that's all I know. I just want to try to love people, and I'm trying to, build my faith back, and become that tongue-speaking, fiery Pentecostal doom prophet again. But right now, I'm happy just trying to love Jesus, love his church, and love people no matter where they are.
Yeah.
And so what has been the impact on your ministry? Have you people canceled you that had?
Are you building decks? Do we need to put your business card up?
I mean, look, I don't want to whine. Yeah, I've lost a lot. I'll just say that, but it is what it is. Look, I've resigned from everything. I'm not connected to any ministries at all. So it's just me. And I finally have a lot of energy to start writing and teaching again. I love teaching the Bible.
Awesome.
I love teaching the Bible. I love the Word of God. And, and I can say with confidence, I don't have any big skeletons in my closet. There's no scandals waiting out there that I'm afraid of. But I don't feel like I'm in a healthy place to be in any type of leadership. I feel like I'm plenty qualified to teach the Bible. I don't have some big secret sins that I'm hiding.
Yeah.
But I'm broken, and I know
Yeah.
it. And so I'm just giving myself to teaching. I'm doing my tours. But in terms of the speaking engagements, it's about 25% of what it normally is. A lot of the churches and ministries are upset with me. And so it is what it is. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know it doesn't fix it, but thank you, honestly. Thank you for speaking up and using your platform. I mean, there were so many times in the early days in particular, Dwayne and I are looking at each other going, oh my gosh, what have we done? We opened this Pandora's box. We weren't going to back down, but you helped, and you said
Massively.
things we couldn't say. And you said them, and you articulated them well, and you had the inner constitution to be able to debate with clarity. And I appreciated that, and I think you helped people move down the needle of discovery. And so, but there is loss, and I'm sorry about that. Like, truly.
And I am incredibly grateful, Joel. Like, when you want to swing something, you've got to hit it hard sometimes, and you got to go way out there just to move people along the dial. And that's what I recognize that you have done. And also Amy, like Amy's going, yeah, this might put us in a really bad place.
Yeah.
But the point of actually bringing light to this, bringing justice, it's greater than the loss that we will take. And so I applaud you guys, and I genuinely am very, very grateful, because Jennifer and I know intimately where we can imagine where you're at, and so I truly am grateful. Shane, who's a good buddy of yours, it was interesting because I'd get on the phone with him, and he was the mediator for some months there, and
with you and IHOP leadership.
And it was always like, they're trying to get me to like quiet Joel down, and I felt like in some ways you're the guy that's like they're having also to put their energy on you and it just even helped take some of the pressure off, I think. And Shane, I appreciate Shane, man, in this. He goes, he's my friend. I'm not going to. He's my friend. I'm not going to do this to him.
Right.
I'm grateful.
Definitely grateful. But I think about, we've all have so much loss, but like Deborah Perkins.
Yeah.
What she's lost is unbelievable.
It's unmeasurable.
And, Tammy and Terry Hartley, and I mean, all the victims, there's a level of solidarity. People have stood with them, but my gosh, the ripple effect of their lives is really huge. Financial loss is significant. And so it's there are days I go, Lord, how will you redeem this mess? Because like you said earlier, these big boys, they still have people that fund them. Yeah. They're not struggling financially.
No, not at all.
It's hard to see.
Yeah. Look, and let me just return the thanks. As I said at the beginning, this has been a group effort. There were some that were on the front lines, but there was many supporting actors, so many people, even just voices, online. Yeah. And this sort of thing. And it's a year and a half later, and let me just sort of give like a post analysis, because I consider myself out of it at this point. I really do, as much as possible. If I can stay out of this stuff, I really want to. But it's almost like now everyone's kind of, and I'm barely paying attention, but like there was an interview a few weeks ago with like Shelley Huntley. And I get it. That caused a big stir. Like there's people that go like, hey, I used to be part of this ministry and this person hurt me, or, Dwayne hurt me, or Shelley hurt me, and this type of thing. And here's the reality, guys. We were all part of a cult. Yeah. Everyone. And I'm saying, like, let's stop devouring one another and let's just kind of show a little bit. Now, people will be like, oh, how dare you try to pressure me to show compassion for other people. Like at a certain point, we have to say, look, we've all been part of the same nightmare. Let's try to love each other, even if that person voted for Trump and that person, thinks Trump is Satan. Like, who cares? We're humans. Mm-hmm. We've all been part of this nightmare. The adrenaline has carried us to a certain point, and it's almost like some people they've been, angry for the past year and a half and they don't know how to stop. And at a certain point, we have to say, let's stop devouring one another, because these are real lives. I don't care if it was a platform minister who you thought was, some big whatever. If they're now, working at a fast food restaurant, just trying to pay their bills and like, they're just people. We're all just people. And it's the wolves that we can all stand against. But in terms of bringing justice and getting my voice out and all these things at this point, to me now it's about just trying to remove the wolves and then and try to, like, as a community, heal. Yeah. And I don't know, I have no business, saying that, but I hope that others, feel that as well, that it's time just for everybody to kind of lay our swords down. Yeah. And try to heal, because otherwise we end up killing ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
What last question I'll ask you, and then we can bring this to an end. But what do you kind of think? You got some thoughts on something you want to write about in the future? What are you studying these days? What's kind of giving you life?
Yeah. So no, I actually just finished a book that I'm so excited about. I just need to just do a couple final read-throughs, but it's basically written. I kind of wrote about half of it a few years ago, and it just sat on my desktop past few years, just, life and depression and procrastination and everything. But basically, I'm just talking about the gospel. But essentially what it is it's a survey of messianic prophecy from the beginning, Genesis to Revelation, and the development of messianic prophecy. And simply by studying messianic prophecy and the covenants, which are all basically just prophetic promises, that you see the story of redemption and the good news that God's telling from the beginning to the end. And it's a beautiful, vibrant story. I'm really drawing from a lot of the rich metaphors. But what I'm doing is, unlike any of my previous books, I've basically trying to write for like a 15-year-old, high school level.
Okay.
Removed all references, citations. Every chapter's like basically 1,000 to 2,000 words max. And I'm actually going to put all kinds of beautiful artwork in it. And I'm just excited about it. Every time I write a book, I go, once I get this done, I can die. But I feel like this will be the best and most important book that I've written so far. And so we'll see once this is done, what comes next.
Come on.
Do you have an idea of timing of when that will be released?
I'm thinking I can get it done before the fall.
Awesome. Yeah. Look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With the artwork I'm doing with AI. So, a year ago you couldn't do this. It would take a couple of years to do all the artwork, but Nowadays, you can say, I want this scene from Psalm, 45, do it in the style of Rembrandt, and it comes out beautiful. And I'm like, this is wonderful. So I'm going to take advantage of AI because we're right in the sweet spot. It can make beautiful pictures, but it doesn't want to quite kill us yet. And so I'm going to try to capitalize while I can.
That's
Beautiful.
awesome.
And you're a guy who's an artist. Like, you know how to create some things. So I actually, I'll give you a pass on that because you know what you're talking about. If I did that, it would be a disaster. But appreciate you, bro. Thanks for taking time, jump on this for us.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on. And
absolutely, bro.
Lord bless you and your family and all the decisions and everything in this next season. So just thank you guys for all the sacrifices that you've made, like from everyone out there. Thank you so much.
Amen. Absolutely. Hey guys, if you know somebody who I think there's some people where Joel has got he has a voice with them, but also I appreciate your transparency. Forward this on because I think there's going to be people that are going to enjoy listening to this. So grace,
so
and we'll see you guys next time.